After careful consideration and reviewing the current eligibility guidelines, I'm officially declaring myself a WNBA prospect. If simply declaring who you are is all that's required, then I meet every single requirement necessary to compete in the WNBA. My team and I have carefully examined the WNBA's eligibility criteria and governing framework surrounding self-identification and inclusion. Based on the current guidelines, I can and am officially declaring my eligibility for the upcoming
That's not satire. That's a former NBA player who averaged 11 points and 10 rebounds across a 10-year career, officially declaring himself eligible for the WNBA Draft. Enes Kanter Freedom just submitted paperwork claiming he meets every requirement based on self-identification policies. And the league's response reveals exactly why this stunt is working so well.
After careful consideration and reviewing the current eligibility guidelines, I am officially declaring myself a WNBA prospect. If simply declaring who you are is all that's required, then I meet every single requirement necessary to compete in the WNBA. My team and I have carefully examined the WNBA's eligibility criteria and governing framework surrounding self-identification and inclusion. Based on the current guidelines, I can and am officially declaring my eligibility for the upcoming WNBA Draft in May 2020.
Notice how carefully he's threading this needle. He's not mocking anyone. He's not making jokes. He's simply asking the WNBA to apply their own stated principles consistently. That's what makes this so effective as political theater. He's taking the league's public advocacy positions and forcing them to either honor those positions or admit there are limits they're not willing to discuss publicly. And the WNBA Players Association walked straight into the trap.
They responded to this. The WNBA Players Association have released a statement regarding the debate of men and women's sports. They call out hate and the demonization of trans people while saying they will not be used as political pawns. They encourage fans to tell their elected officials to strengthen Title IX, while encouraging them to report hateful and abusive behavior to security games. A message from WNBPA leadership to everyone who loves this game, to the 40,000. The WNBPA represents 200 plus individual people with different lived experiences, cultures, lifestyles, and opinions. We embrace justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Read that statement again. They called it hate, abuse, and demonization. They told fans to report abusive behavior at games and online. They're treating a policy question as a safety threat. Here's what they didn't do. Explain what specific eligibility requirements Kanter fails to meet. They didn't cite their actual draft guidelines. They didn't reference biological sex requirements in their collective bargaining agreement. Instead, they released a word salad about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, while accusing anyone asking questions of fueling fear and division. That's not a policy response. That's a deflection. And it's exactly the response Kanter was counting on.
ChatGPT, you did a good job writing this. You did a very good job writing this. I mean, this is hilarious. I mean, the WNBA is a political organization. The problem is they get to define hate. So that means Enes Freedom will be able to play, right? No, you pieces of damn. You are a women's league and you are shameful and refusing to stand up. Wow. The first overall pick, Enes Kanter. Shout out to him. Shout out to... Gosh, let's do this. Let's do this.
What's your favorite part about playing in the WNBA?
Ooh, I'd say probably whacking off in the showers. Yeah, everyone's just looking at you and they're absolutely disgusted, but they're too afraid to say something because that makes them a bigot and also somehow a racist at the same time. It's great. Fear gets me off.
This is where it gets interesting. The comment section under that WNBA statement turned into a masterclass in using progressive language against itself. People started calling the Players Association transphobic for rejecting Kanter's self-identification. They accused the league of bigotry for not affirming his declared identity. They demanded the WNBA honor its stated principles of inclusion. It's trolling, obviously, but it's trolling that exposes a genuine tension the league hasn't figured out how to address publicly.
And ask them how your nuts smelled?
Oh, I most definitely did. And they're lucky we don't share a shower, otherwise they'd be finding out. And I'm on my fake period right now, which means there's just a bunch of dried, stale ketchup down there in my panties, and it don't smell good.
As a trans person, what rights do you specifically don't have?
Well, number one, I can't get buck naked at a parade, put a puppet around my dinger around a bunch of kids. oppression.
Okay, that's just disgusting and uncalled for.
Some people bring their kids to it. It's art. Look, I'm just as feminine as Asia Wilson or Brittany Griner. My apologies to Bam Adebayo and Kevin Durant, but y'all might be gay.
That's the satirical version, but it illustrates the actual concern that millions of people have about self-identification policies in women's sports. The WNBA has been vocal about transgender inclusion. Multiple players have advocated for policies that prioritize gender identity over biological sex. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert has made public statements supporting LGBTQ athletes. But when someone like Kanter tests whether those policies actually mean what they say, the response is to call it hate speech rather than engage with the substance.
Embarrassing behavior. Folks, bring your sense of humor for these comments. Wow, why are you so hateful and bigoted? Clearly you didn't read the WNBPA statement on stopping this kind of demonization. Shame on you. Here's CDS. Damn, what a disgusting, bigoted, hateful transphobe you are. Truly disgusting. Hopefully you lose your job. We can't have this kind of transphobic behavior from media. Truly vile. It's always...
And then there's the collateral damage. A Connecticut Sun beat reporter named Noah Dalzell posted that Kanter's declaration was embarrassing behavior. That's a completely reasonable take from a journalist covering women's basketball. She's saying a male former NBA player declaring for the WNBA draft is embarrassing. Watch what happened to her in the comments. Hundreds of responses accusing her of transphobia. People saying she's a bigot for not affirming Kanter's identity. Comments asking how she can call herself an ally while attacking a brave trans athlete. It's relentless, and it's using the exact language that WNBA players and media typically use to defend transgender inclusion.
On another, wow, that shit makes me laugh. Wait, are you calling her embarrassing for how she identifies? The transphobia is crazy. How dare you attack a brave trans athlete for finally embracing who she truly is? Shame on you. Please don't speak about fellow strong, successful women like this. It's 2026. Being a misogynist doesn't look good on you. Wow, she's getting wrecked. Wow. Your comment is super transphobic. Wow. I bet you look at yourself in the mirror and call yourself an ally. Shame on you. That's an extremely transphobic comment. Are you saying?
The reason this is working as a political statement is because Kanter has actual credibility on standing up for principles at personal cost. He didn't just tweet support for causes that were popular with his peer group. He criticized the Chinese government's human rights record and got blackballed from the NBA for it. He spoke out against authoritarianism in Turkey and can't safely return to his home country. He was one of the few players willing to publicly challenge LeBron James on his China comments. So when he says he's simply asking for consistent application of stated principles, people take him seriously. He's not some random troll. He's someone who sacrificed his career for his beliefs.
Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Like the video, hype the video, subscribe to the channel. That means so much to me. See you next time, and as always, take it easy.
Now let's talk about what's actually in the WNBA's eligibility requirements, because this is where the league's response gets even more confusing. According to the current collective bargaining agreement signed in January 2020, players must be at least 22 years old during the calendar year of the draft. They need to have graduated from a 4-year college or be 4 years removed from high school. Nowhere in the publicly available documents does it explicitly state that players must be biologically female. The assumption has always been implicit because it's the Women's National Basketball Association. But implicit assumptions are exactly what self-identification policies are designed to challenge. The NCAA updated its transgender participation policy in January 2022 to allow each sport to set its own standards. Some require testosterone suppression for a certain period. Others have different criteria. The WNBA has never publicly clarified what their standard is, because they've never had to address it directly, until now. And instead of clarifying their policy, they called the question itself hateful.
Bad actors. At home, tell your elected officials to strengthen Title IX. Now, putting word salad in written form, very impressive. To take word salad and turn it in and actually put it to paper, put pen to paper, put fingers to keyboard to the document. It takes some serious levels of skill, and I admire whoever.
This gets to the heart of why Kanter's stunt is resonating beyond just conservative media. There's a genuine question here about how women's sports leagues handle the tension between inclusion advocacy and competitive fairness. The WNBA has positioned itself as progressive on social issues. Players kneel during the anthem. They advocate for criminal justice reform. They support LGBTQ rights. Commissioner Engelbert has made diversity and inclusion central to the league's brand identity. But when those principles get tested with a specific scenario that makes people uncomfortable, the response is to shut down the conversation rather than have it. Compare this to how other sports have handled it. World Athletics, the international governing body for track and field, banned transgender women who went through male puberty from competing in female events as of March 2023. They cited competitive fairness and safety. World Aquatics did the same thing for swimming in June 2022, after Leah Thomas's NCAA championship. The International Cycling Union has testosterone limits and transition period requirements. These organizations took heat for those decisions. They were called transphobic. Athletes protested, but they made a clear policy decision and explained their reasoning based on competitive integrity. The WNBA hasn't done that. They've made public statements supporting inclusion without defining what that means in practice. And now they're facing questions they don't want to answer. Look at that statement again. We will not be used as political pawns. But the WNBA Players Association is explicitly political. They endorsed political candidates in 2020. They campaigned against Kelly Loeffler when she owned the Atlanta Dream. They wear social justice messages on their warm-ups. They use their platform to advocate for policy changes. You don't get to be political only when it's convenient. If you're going to make advocacy part of your brand identity, you have to be prepared to defend your positions when they're challenged. Calling the challenge hate doesn't make the underlying question go away. Here's what makes this particularly awkward for the league. WNBA ratings and attendance hit record highs in 2024, driven almost entirely by Caitlin Clark's rookie season. The Indiana Fever averaged 1.18 million viewers per game on national television when Clark played. That's higher than NBA regular season averages for many teams. The league's total attendance increased 48% compared to 2023. But that growth came from mainstream sports fans, not the core progressive audience the league had been targeting. And mainstream sports fans have very different views on transgender participation in women's sports than the typical WNBA social media activist. A Gallup poll from June 2024 found that 69% of Americans believe transgender athletes should only be allowed to compete on teams that match their birth gender. That number includes majorities of Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. The WNBA's new audience doesn't necessarily share the Players Association's views on this issue, so the league is caught between its stated principles and its business interests. Alienate the new mainstream audience by fully embracing self-identification policies, or alienate the core progressive base by setting biological limits. There's no easy answer, and Kanter just forced them to pick. The other problem is that this exposes how selectively the WNBA applies its own standards about inclusion and respect. When Kelsey Plum criticized fans for being too negative, the league defended her right to speak out. When Dearica Hamby accused the Las Vegas Aces of discrimination over her pregnancy, the league investigated and fined the team. When players demanded better travel conditions and higher salaries, Commissioner Engelbert said she was listening. But when someone asks a straightforward question about eligibility requirements for a women's sports league, it's suddenly hate speech that needs to be reported to security. That inconsistency is what makes the trolling so effective. It's not about Kanter actually wanting to play in the WNBA. It's about demonstrating that the league's commitment to open dialogue and inclusion has very specific boundaries that they're not willing to discuss honestly. Now think about the position this puts individual players in. There are absolutely WNBA players who have private concerns about transgender participation, but can't say so publicly without being labeled bigots by their own union. There are players who support inclusion in principle, but worry about competitive fairness in practice. There are players who don't want to talk about this at all because they just want to play basketball. But the Players Association just issued a statement on behalf of all of them, declaring that any questioning of self-identification policies is hate and demonization. They didn't poll the membership. They didn't allow for nuance or dissent. They took the most aggressive progressive position possible and told everyone that's the official union stance. That's not representation. That's ideological enforcement. And here's the thing about Enes Kanter specifically. He didn't have to do this. He's already sacrificed his NBA career for his principles. He's already established himself as someone willing to take unpopular positions. He could have just moved on with his life after basketball. But he chose to make this statement now, in 2025, when the WNBA is experiencing unprecedented growth and mainstream attention. That timing isn't accidental. He's forcing this conversation precisely when the league can least afford to handle it poorly. Because if the WNBA says Kanter isn't eligible, they have to explain why. And any explanation based on biological sex contradicts their public advocacy for self-identification. But if they don't clearly reject his application, they legitimize the concern that their policies could theoretically allow biological males to compete against women. It's a perfect political trap. And the Players Association's response suggests they have no idea how to get out of it. Let's be clear about what's actually at stake here. This isn't really about Enes Kanter playing in the WNBA. Nobody thinks that's going to happen. This is about whether women's sports leagues can maintain sex-based eligibility requirements without being accused of bigotry by the same progressive activists they've been courting for years. The WNBA built its brand around social justice advocacy. They centered their marketing on being more progressive than other leagues. They celebrated being on the right side of history on various political issues. And now they're discovering that progressive politics has internal contradictions they're not allowed to acknowledge. You can't simultaneously argue that biological sex is irrelevant to gender identity, and that women's sports leagues should be protected spaces for biological females. Those positions are in tension, and the WNBA has been pretending that tension doesn't exist. Kanter just made it impossible to keep pretending. So what happens next? The WNBA has a few options, none of them good. They can ignore Kanter's declaration entirely and hope it goes away. That makes them look weak and evasive. They can issue a statement clarifying that eligibility requires being biologically female. That contradicts their inclusion messaging and opens them up to criticism from LGBTQ advocates. Or they can maintain their current position that questioning their policies is hate speech, which makes them look authoritarian and unreasonable to the mainstream audience that's finally paying attention to women's basketball. My guess is they'll try to ignore it and hope the news cycle moves on. But the underlying question isn't going away. As women's sports continue to grow in popularity and revenue, the tension between inclusion ideology and competitive fairness is going to keep coming up. And every time it does, leagues are going to have to choose between their progressive brand identity and the biological reality that makes women's sports necessary in the first place. The WNBA wanted to be the most progressive league in professional sports. Careful what you wish for, because now they have to live with the contradictions that come with that position. And a former NBA player just exposed those contradictions in the most public way possible, using their own language against them. So here's my question for you. Should the WNBA explicitly state that eligibility requires being biologically female, or should they maintain that self-identification is sufficient? You can't have it both ways. Pick a side in the comments, because this conversation is just getting started.